Now the last class of this series and this application would be actually the performing message class, in which we're going to be actually handling out the messages among the user or between the two users of the Android devices who they are actually interacting with each other through messages. So all the messages will be handled out in this class. So let's get started. First of all, I'm going to make it an activity. So extends activity, that's it. And then I'm just gonna create a few variables in here. I'm gonna create a variable public static final int, and in here I'm gonna say that out message not send is equal to 0. So if the message is not sent, it will be actually initialized or assigned a value at 0. And now I'm gonna get into the messagebox.xml file, and in this message box what I have is actually a history message box in here, another edit text box, and a send button. So I'm going to create a references for all of them. So I'm going to create a public edit text message box, public edit text. Actually this one is not an edit text, it is actually a text view, so I'm going to make it text view, view, and public edit text, and the second name would be of it is actually a send message. So I'm going to actually check it out, its ID send message. Yes, I'm going to use a send message, that's it. And the next one would be actually a button, so it's going to be send button, that's it. I'm going to now import all of the classes in here, the edit text and the button one, and save it, press enter. So now once again I'm going to create a reference to the manager class, because if I just click on manager class, it contains a method send message. So we're going to be actually implementing this manager class send message. So I'm going to get back to performing message class, and here what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to create a reference manager send message, or you can call it service provider. That's it. I'm going to actually import the statement, press enter, save it. Now I'm going to create a reference to the actually storage manipulator class, and as well as information of friend class. The information of friend class reference is important because we're going to have to get out the username, like the friends list name, that who is actually chatting with that. So if I just get into the message box one, here would be actually the username and then his message, the username and then his message. For that purpose we're going to need info friends information. And the storage manipulator class is important because if when we are actually chatting with each other, we're going to have to save this chat inside a database. So for that purpose we are actually using storage manipulator class for storage of database, and we're going to be using actually SQLite database for storing the messages. And then we're going to be using a cursor for actually accessing and retrieving the data from the database. So let's get started. I'm going to say out public info friends, equal to new info friends, and then I'm going to create public storage manipulator. There will be actually from this one, and local data storage, that's it. And then I'm going to create a public cursor, that's it. I'm going to import a cursor. A cursor is actually used to retrieve the data from a database. I'm going to press enter and save it. Now once again, as we all know that while adding a friend or like messaging with each other, you're going to need a network connection, and for that network connection you're going to have to use a service connection class. So once again I'm going to put a service connection class in here, and now once again as you can see that I've actually added the service connection class, and now I'm just going to press enter in here. And now once again I'm just gonna now create an onCreate method. For that purpose I'm gonna have to once again pause the video for the savage of time, because if I begin to type all these methods it will take an enormous time. But when I just typed it, and then I would explain each line one by one. So now I actually added the onCreate method. Now let me discuss it one by one. So in onCreate method I have actually once again set the content view layout to the message box one, that is actually, if I just scroll, and that would be actually layout message box one. And then the message box I've just actually created a reference to it, but to send message button, and then the send message request focus. So what the send message request focus means that the user will be able to actually write it on that. And then I've created a send button reference to, and then I've just actually created the bundle extras. So what does bundle extras do? Bundle extras create a significant role while we are actually transiting or providing a communication from one activity to another, or we are actually communicating with other things. So bundle extras is actually the way to transfer the information. So in this case we are actually transferring the username of the a person like demo1, demo2, or anyone, the IP and the port, and plus the message. We are actually sending all these 4 variables with the help of bundles, that is actually named as extras, and we are actually sending and communicating with that extras. So how we are doing this, we are actually getting the username, IP, port, and message text from the information of friend class, and then we're going to be actually using these all things inside this performing message class. And why we are actually using this, because we're going to have to know what is the username and as well as the IP plus port. And then I'm going to provide a set title with the message width plus friends username. And then I'm going to use a local data storage for actually storing the messages which is actually taking place among the users. So for that purpose I have actually created the reference and instantiated the new storage manipulator, which is actually this class. If I double click on storage manipulator, you can find it out that we have actually created a table plus a database inside the storage manipulator class, and that is actually an SQLite database. So now we're going to be actually making access to that SQLite database and going to be making it use of. So actually I've passed in the parameter, the context is this, and we are actually wanting to store the message among the users, and then the rest of the parameters are 0. Then I'm gonna use a cursor. With the help of cursor, actually I can get the username and the message service username from the database. So with the help of cursor, I'm actually getting the friend's username and as well as the message which is actually taking place among the users. So if the cursor.getCount is greater than 0, which means that if we are going to access that database and in that database messages are there or the friend username is there, then we're going to be actually creating a variable of number of scorer, and we're going to be actually setting a value of it to 0. Number of scorer is actually used to take or to track on the number of friends and number of messages inside the database. For example, if we have 5 messages, then the number of scorer will start from 0, and then 1, and then 2, and then 3. And how it's gonna actually increment by 1 with the help of this statement. So if we have 5 messages, then the number of scorer will be incremented 1 by 1, and this value will reach to 5 with the help of a number of scorer plus plus. And actually we are putting the cursor.move to first method. This is when, for example, in row 1, if the cursor picked up the username and the message, then it will go to the second row, and then it go to the third row, but it will start from the first row. So for that purpose we are actually starting move to the first one, and then we're going to actually loop through each row in the database, and we're going to be actually using that if the cursor is not after the last and the number of score is less than cursor.getCount. This means that if the cursor has not been yet reached to the last row of the messages or the username, then increment the number of scorer by 1. And then what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to actually append to the message history box. This dot append message history box means that you're gonna actually append that cursor row which you have actually get at the row 2 and get string 3, which means that one would be for username and one would be for the message. So we are actually then appending those all data which we have actually got from the database and appending it to the message box inside here. So the first string which actually we are referring is the get string 2 would be a username, and the get string 3 would be actually a password, and then we actually move the cursor to the next row. And then in here we actually close the local data storage, because now we have finished out our working with the local data storage. And then we're going to check it out that if the message is something, means if there is some message and the message is not null, then actually you're going to have to append it with the user message box 1 in here. You're going to have to append it this message box, and the friend username and message would be in a row, just like I've told you in here. and then we're going to actually provide a notification manager get system service, and this notification manager is used to actually notify the user about the cancellation of this thing. The next one is actually the send button. So if a user click on the send button, so on click listener will be actually activated with that. I have actually provided a char sequence message because the message should be in a day with the data type of char sequence because it is supported by. And then I'm going to create a handler to handle out the threads because we're going to be using the threads in that case. Because sending the message and clicking the button at once is actually doing two tasks simultaneously. So for that purpose, we're going to have to actually use the threads. And then inside the message variable, which I have previously created, I'm going to provide a send message.getText. Send message is actually an edit text box, and I'm getting the text from that edit text box and placing it inside a message. So if the user typed in there something which is greater than 0, means the user typed in there something, then append to message history service provider get username and message to string. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to use the manager class, and you will use the get username class. So you will actually get the username of that person who is actually sending the message, and then you will convert it to a string. And after that, you will actually insert it inside a database by using local data storage insert, and then you will once again get the username and plus the friend's username, and you will convert it to a string, and then you will store it inside a database. And then you will actually send message or set text to null, which means that you actually would blank out the edit text box from which we are actually sending the message to another person, so that it will actually blank it out and you will be able to write it in once again. So to handle out this all activity, we're going to have to create a thread, because we are actually doing two things at the same time by sending the message and as well as pressing the send button. So for that purpose, what I'm going to provide is an if statement that if service provider dot send message service provider dot get username friend username message to string is equal to null, which means that if there is no message in the edit box has been written by the user, and it can't be actually converted to a string, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to use a handler to handle this thread, and you would actually create a toast to prompt the user that the message can't be sent because there is nothing to be sent out. So how could we send anything like that? And then actually you would actually catch the inception by unsupported encoded exception. Unsupported encoding exception means if sometime there happening an opportunity that your message is actually not encoded. For example, your message is encoded in UTF-8 and the communication service required some other encoding technique. So for that purpose, it gives some kind of encoding exception. So to track it out, that we're going to have to use a catch statement. And now at the last, I'm going to start the thread, and then it will begin to execute that thing.